Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Studio. I'm thrilled today to have Blonka Winkfield back in the house. Welcome, Blonka.
Hello, good morning.
For those of you who don't remember Blonka, she's been on a few of our podcasts now, quite a few. And we've worked together for a long time, but she's also an amazing mentor, cheerleader, and coach of many women in the world today. And she serves on many boards, and she is just an amazing person on our team and really on many, many teams around the world. She also reigns from Howard University as well as Stony Brook. And anyway, Blonka, welcome back. It's good to have you.
Thank you. I'm beginning to feel like, like Justin Bieber or Tiffany Chalamet of Saturday Night Live.
There you go. There you go.
That repeat host. I love it.
I love it. And I brought you back today because we're going to talk about something that you and I have spoken about a lot, but a lot of people, because maybe of where the time in our lives we're at, women of a certain age, or because of where we are in our careers, which would, to an outsider would mark as like they're successful. They've done some things. They're here at this point in their lives. But one of the things that you and I have spoken about often is this feeling of, whether you call it imposter syndrome or imposter feelings, or sometimes the anxiety or nerves that get to you, however you define it, of that moment of, I don't maybe belong, or I don't feel like I deserve this, or they're going to find me out any minute now. Any of those feelings that so many workers, and the research shows that it goes across gender, it goes across race, that everybody at some point in their careers has a feeling of imposter syndrome, or I like to sometimes call it imposter feelings, because the syndrome somehow makes it feel like, you have a disease or something, when in fact it is feelings, and it comes and goes often. And now I think Forbes recently revealed some research that said 62% of knowledge workers worldwide face imposter syndrome pretty regularly. And 2024, an article in Forbes also reported that 75% of U.S. women executives have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their careers. So either way, it's widespread. It certainly seems to be part of the vernacular these days. I think in the past, everybody probably experienced it. They just didn't know what to term it. And now it seems to be a pretty popular term that even, probably our Blonka, you and I kids who are young adults use this term, know it, so to speak. So I just wanted to tackle it a little bit in terms of your feelings around it, your thoughts, and ways that some tips that people can get to help them when these moments kind of arise. So you want to talk about it from your perspective, where you see it either in yourself or in folks that you work with and so many women that you mentor and talk to across the country?
Yeah, I think it's a very pertinent thing to talk about right now, because you have such a collision in the workspace of, people who are very well established. Younger people have their own ideals of what work should look like, and where they fit in that. Because, as you mentioned, like 75% of female executives at some point in time, no matter where they are across the spectrum of their careers, have had some feeling of this. Now, another thing that you mentioned a second ago that I want to touch on is the name, the imposter syndrome, because one, when Clance and I started out with this way back in the 70s, it wasn't called imposter syndrome. It was called imposter phenomenon, because, and that's why it's so kind of controversial right now. It was a phenomenon because people saw it in flashes. Phenomenon's like a comet, happen every now and again. It does not happen over a long period of time. And a syndrome is something that psychologically is something that happens over a long period of time. So right now, I'd say probably like in the 90s, they started bumping it up from phenomenon to syndrome, because they realized it was so prevalent. But now the backlash has kind of started in that people are like, syndrome is very harsh, because a syndrome is something that's in like the psychological, DMS that says this is a problem with you, And so when people are now like, I don't want to be attached to that, even though, as you said, 75% of people experience it in some way, people are kind of pushing back on it now. It's like, for me and for you and I, as you said, have talked about this before. I know I've had it, and it's not just an underlying thing, like I was saying, like that every time I walk into a room or in a business scenario, I feel this way. But it may pop up before a board meeting, or it may pop up, when I've gotten promoted, or it may pop up when I go to do a workshop for another group of people that I don't know, who I feel like might be more senior to me, or maybe in a room that has more knowledge about a particular subject than I do. So it's not necessarily just about you feeling inept internally all the time, which people kind of get, stuck in their craw when they hear the word, the statement imposter syndrome. It's just that in any given moment, you can go, these people may be more knowledgeable about this thing than I am. And I feel some kind of way, like maybe I shouldn't be a part of this conversation. So it can be as small as that or as big as I really genuinely don't feel like I know enough to be in the job that they've promoted me to right now.
Yeah.
So it's that kind. It can be either of those things, but I just want to put that out there because some people do get a little, feathers get a little ruffled when you talk about it in that manner.
I love that. That's really interesting, talking about going from historically from a phenomenon to a syndrome to now. I've heard people call it feelings, like imposter feelings, or to me, I think before I knew the term for it, I would have defined it for myself as maybe a crisis of confidence.
Yes.
And now I'm kind of like, oh, okay, that's a little bit of that imposter syndrome in me. It's still there. I recently did a big talk, which I'm doing more and more of these days. And there were probably, I don't know, about 200, 250 people in the room. But it was quite daunting when I walked in there, with the lights and the tons of people. And, and there was that moment of like, oh God, like, do I have anything to offer? Am I just a fraud going to get up here? And like, there was a flash of that. And then I was thinking about it in getting ready for today, like what got me past that? Because once I got up there and kind of breathed it in and looked around, everything was fine. And I had a great time, and really enjoyed myself and got through that flash or that imposter flash that came over me, whatever you want to call it. And I think part of it was this moment of looking around at connecting with some people and seeing them and going, you know what, that looks like a great person. I want to connect with them. I want to be in service of them, and whatever I have that could be in service, maybe that's enough. And that kind of got me into a place of like, yep, that is of value to someone today, So I thought that was interesting. I recently heard somebody say that a psychologist talk about, well, one of the ways that you can get that you have to, not have to, but one of the ways that can be valuable in figuring out how to get through imposter syndrome is to really look at like where it comes from.
Yep.
And that was kind of deep for me to think about. She gave an example. She said, most of this stuff happens when we're quite young and like the things that come over us. And so I started thinking about that for myself. And I started thinking about, I think that those feelings of, not enough, or I'm not good at this, or, because I think as a kid, I was always outgoing. I was a people person, even as a young child. And I was able to, you can get away with a lot with that ability, right? Because a lot of kids aren't as comfortable talking to grownups or being around folks. And I was able to do that. But then when things started getting hard in terms of like things I wasn't comfortable with, like math, and I remember my mom saying to me, I'd go to my mom for help and she'd say, go to your father. He's great at math. Go to your father. And, now as a parent, I'm sure that she was like, oh my God, do I have to do everything? Can you just not go to him? Yeah. Right. But back then I was remember being terrified and my dad going, come on, let's work on math. And I remember being just terrified that he would see me as somebody who didn't know and somehow I wouldn't be loved or wouldn't be good enough. Right. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened, because we tend to create whatever we're afraid of. Right. And so as a kid, my dad is good at math. He's an engineer mind. He was also a gambler. He was just kind of a math genius at all moments, and count cards and, had shortcuts for everything. And so when we would work on our math problems, he would never do it the way I was taught to do it. He would do like shortcuts of it that he thought was strategic and fun and that I would love that. But, I was such a rule follower that I was like, no, I cannot possibly learn this way. This is not how the teacher's teaching us. And I was in such turmoil that he was going to see that I could not keep up with the way his mind was working, that I remember just tears and shut down, and my brain would shut down, and and then he would get frustrated and I would get frustrated. And it was just like, I felt like, at some core of a child that this is driving my father away, like this, that it was that important that I thought I cannot show him this vulnerability or this weakness because this is the end of us. Like that's how it felt. So to this day, when I run, this Blonka Blonka, I run a company. And then when I have to have those conversations with people like the finance people or the outside auditors or the bank, that moment of like having to sit with my dad and defend my numbers or talk about that, all of those feelings come up. I just don't always know that that's where they're coming from. But it's pretty like, oh God, really? I'm 54 years old. I'm still going to be thinking about that.
Yes, but yes. Yes, and there's so many interesting things because I do know both of your parents. The funny part is your mom, I'm pretty sure is good at math as well. So that's hilarious to me. But that's the thing that we do, like we even pigeonhole ourselves, and I'm sure most of what your mom's thing was, get away from me, kids, go make your dad do something. But that also as a kid puts in your mind, boys are better at math than girls are. From a very early age, period. When both of them equally in your house probably could have done that fourth grade level math that you were seeking out, or, like seventh grade. So it starts with like digging down deep, like, where do you get this information from? Why do you think this way? And when I think the hard things that I've been dealing with, because I struggled with this throughout graduate school, because I was always in science. And so being in science, I always knew I was good because I always did it. Like it came to me so naturally, like public speaking, all that comes very naturally. That came naturally to me. But as you said, when I was put in rooms where I felt like somebody else definitely has more knowledge than me in this area, or is going to see that, oh, she's not as smart as she thinks she is, that's when I would have my freak out moments and then kind of revert to, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is not good for me. I'd kind of run in that direction. And, just looking at it and reading up, more and more about it recently. I came across a really good article by this guy, Kevin Coakley. He's at the University of Michigan, but I think he wrote it for the Harvard Business Review. And because when I was in graduate school, and I was one of the only women and definitely the only person of color in my graduate school, my PhD cohort at that time, I started looking for things about that because it seems to be a lot, like in STEM sciences, over like 60% of STEM students across the board, male and females, have some moments of this. It is very prevalent in that field. Yeah. And scientists are also mean little people. I'm just kidding. But, because scientists, like, they're the smartest people in the world in their mind. So they, they don't suffer fools lightly. Going to them, I'm sure it felt like you going to your dad asking for help. It's very daunting, even though scientists are supposed to be teaching other people.
And they're supposed to be curious and, all sorts of things.
All the things, right?
Yeah.
But not so much,
Yeah.
So when I was looking at that, there have been a lot of studies, particularly recently, about being a woman or people of color, like being an other or an outsider when it comes to imposter syndrome. And so a lot of people are kind of fighting about it now as well, with the idea that if they say it's an imposter syndrome, right? If it's a syndrome, something that's very big. And they're also looking at putting it into the DMS as like a mental thing. It's not in there yet, but they keep talking about it. And one of the big fights they're having is that if it moves its way in there, that becomes a problem that's wrong with me, not a problem that's wrong with society. Which, when you look at a lot of the reasons that people, in air quotes, suffer from imposter syndrome or have a moment with that, it's not only because of how they're feeling internally, it's because society and things, ageism, racism, sexism, all of those things have made us feel less than and not worthy, So that's become a very big thing. It's like, if it becomes some kind of mental issue, then that means it's all on Blonka's, it's all on my plate to deal with. But if people look at it as a societal issue, that means society has to change how they view women, what they think of women, what they think of people of color in these scenarios. And then that becomes a bigger thing, which is, as I said, lots of the reasons why women have those issues, particularly.
It's so interesting, right, as this progresses, because we're definitely in the middle of it. It's part of the zeitgeist. It's part of what people are talking about. I agree with you. It's not something that boomers don't have and Gen Zs do. It's just maybe we didn't know the words for it at some point, right? And now it's so much a part of our vocabulary. So with that in mind, and with that it goes, so many people feel it, right? What are some things, let's talk about some tips that people can do when these moments come up. I'm going to give you a moment to think. I'm going to say the first one because it kind of goes to what I was talking about in my story. And that is that someone told me once, name it to tame it. So if you can say, I am feeling imposter syndrome right now, somehow just saying it moves you on the steps through it. It's when we don't see it that sometimes it's living in our brain, taking over and aspire, that kind of doom scroll that it can tend to do. So I'm making a conscious effort to name entertainment when I feel the feelings creep in. What's another tip that you have for folks out there?
I think one of the biggest ones is the rethinking how you think about things negatively. Like oftentimes you're like, I'm the worst at this. I suck at this. I'm not good enough to be at, in this position. So how are you reframing that? How are you rethinking about it? And, we talked about this, and I'm sure you've talked about this with other people, that, taking that story and twisting it, turning it on its head and making it a positive thought is, it's not like just some Pollyanna thing. It's not like I'm going to make everything great and take it from being negative to great. It's not just as simple as that. When you do that, your mind actually changes. Like you can change your mind, and actually changes your mind, right? So, I've heard you speak about this, before. When you speak positively to yourself, when you're reframing a negative thought, turning into a positive thought, your brain releases neurotransmitters. Two of the main ones, dopamine and serotonin, which are great for you. Dopamine's your fun one, get you moving. Once you hit the little hit of that, you want more of it. And serotonin is one that causes you to be able to focus, see what's real in life, ease things out, smooth out the rough edges. So when you're doing that, you're thinking positively to yourself, you're like, oh, this feels good. Talking to myself positively feels good. Oh, I'm a little less stressed now. I can be a little more focused. And then you can move your mind kind of in that positive direction, right? The other thing that speaking positively to yourself or taking that negative thought and flipping it does, which is my favorite one, is it releases, or it tamps down the stress hormone cortisol. So when you bring that, cortisol level down, which usually if it's high, it's a lot of stress hormone. But the better thing about all of this, you can change your mind and all that, but cortisol also does something horrible, gives you that little fat cap on your belly. And women of my age, that's one of the big things that we want no part of. So thinking positively, not only does it help your brain and help you, decrease your imposter syndrome, it's also your own little like Ozempic. Like it's like right here in the middle, like brings it down a little bit. So I think it's like a twofer.
I bet nobody else is talking about this as the Ozempic.
That's what I'm here for.
I love it.
I'm freaking here for.
If that doesn't motivate our listeners to get working on their imposter feelings, I don't know what will. That's great. You know what? I love what you said about, because sometimes it feels corny to say these like positive thoughts to yourself, especially some of us in Gen X, we laugh at like, what was it, Stuart Smalley on SNL years ago. They'll be like, you're awesome. And gosh darn it, people like you. We would make fun of that. But today, you're absolutely right. There's real science behind it. And people that do this on a regular, whether it's their gratitudes that they say, whether it's something positive that they combat their mind, it really is. It's studied in positive intelligence. Can you make your mind work for good and work for you rather than against you? I also think that a good kind of crutch in this sometimes for me, and I've seen you do it really successfully even lately, is if you can't get to that point with yourself, with it, we can help each other, so that if we're struggling and we're in a doom spiral in our head of like, I suck, I'm never going to be able to do this, I'm not sure why am I doing it, that somebody else can sometimes say to you, and I know someone has said it to me often, I try to say his words back in my head, is like, Christine, you are offering a value to them. You are not asking for a sale. You are not asking for this. You are offering something that is very valuable, that they need you just as much as you need them. And I say that little mantra over and over before I have to go in and pitch something. They need me as much as I need them. And I think that's really valuable. And you were telling me a story about when you were speaking recently at a conference. I thought this was great. You had people write down, right, on an index card. Tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but you had them write down on an index card a imposter feeling that they had, right? One point. And then what happened with that? Give us the one example.
So they wrote down something that, they felt like I don't know enough to be in this job, or I don't deserve this promotion, or whatever it was they had in that moment or had felt in their career. It didn't have to be something they're experiencing in that moment. And then they turned that in, gave it to someone else. And then that person was charged with flipping that card over and then taking that negative statement and then turning it into like a really bold, positive thought, right? Like if for example, if it was, I don't know enough to be in this job, then that person might have turned it over and wrote, I am constantly learning and evolving in my position. That's what great leaders do. Right. And then that person would get the card back. And then for that person to take a look at that and like go, oh, wow, this, I didn't see it this way at all. That is a powerful moment for people. People have like thought partners for jobs and for projects. It's also good to have a positive thought partner in life. That may be part of your mentor or your cheerleader, somebody you can go to, but to have that positive thought partner who can tell you, no, you're amazing. You're really, no, you got this. You're good. Luckily, I work with a bunch of people who do that for me all the time. Like the moment I say I'm not, they're totally like, you are. And most importantly, here's why. Because the biggest part of imposter syndrome is not that you are saddled with self-doubt or fear of being exposed as something that you're not. The biggest key is that it is all of that despite the evidence of the contrary. So you feel that way, but there's tons of evidence that says that's wrong. And you completely choose to ignore that. Like, completely like, that's not true. Like, no, because 9 times out of 10, like, you got a promotion. I don't deserve this promotion. Well, guess what? There's a crap ton of evidence that says that you do.
That's the scientific term, crap ton.
Crap ton, yes. All the high scientists use it. Because mainly they gave you the job.
Right.
Right. Unless there's some serious nepotism happening or some other nefarious things. But in general, you got a promotion because you deserved it.
Yeah.
And even if you're like, well, so-and-so, Jane was more qualified or this, that, or the other, there's something about you that led you to be in that space. That's another big one.
I love that despite the evidence, I love that because we will ignore all the positives and just see that one little negative comment, oh my God.
And part of it is comparing yourself. Because I was going to say, usually like, oh, Jane probably deserved this more than I did, or so-and-so, or Mike, but stop comparing yourself. One of the things that we like to say, oh, that's for the kids. The kids are always comparing themselves on the Facebooks and the Twitter webs. We don't do that, but we do. No matter what age you are, people oftentimes are still comparing their, maybe not themselves, but my team. Oh, that team over there met all their goals this year. I've got to do better. I'm not a good boss because this didn't happen. You don't know the dynamics of that team. You don't know exactly what's going on over there. You can't compare yourself, Comparison is the thief of joy. And we steal that little bit of joy from ourselves all the time by comparing our individual selves, our teams, our companies, our salaries, all these other things that kind of build into that idea of I don't deserve or I'm not good enough because we're comparing it to what we see out there in the world.
Yeah. And I see this with, you can see this with mom friends as well. It's like whether you're feeling like, oh, I'm a terrible mom because I'm working too much or I'm not home, or my friends who are stay-at-home moms, and they'll sometimes be like, oh, I'm a terrible mom because I'm not a role model for my kids and working, and I never, I haven't worked in a while, or I used to work and this. So no matter what, we're all kind of beating ourselves up for something. It's just
for something. My kid didn't walk as fast as that person's kid. Oh, my kid doesn't,
I'm terrible.
My son still isn't potty trained yet. Like, whatever. They're not going to be 20-year-olds, not potty trained. It'll work itself out. But, we don't, sometimes you have those moments of just like, you can't see your way through it.
Yeah.
Like you're stuck in that moment and you find it very difficult to see your way through it and figure out what's on the other side or looking at the good things. That's another, another one, how to get through it is, and this sounds whack, I know, and I'm not telling anybody to be a slacker, but just be okay with being good enough in that moment. Don't stress yourself out.
Yeah.
Perfectionism is overrated and dumb. Plain and simple. Like, nobody's perfect, Yeah. My version of perfect is not going to be your version of perfect. My version of perfect is definitely probably not going to be my boss's perfect version of perfect.
And perfect is boring. Like that, I used to want to be perfect. And then I was like, I went to a conference and saw a bunch of perfect women. And I was like, this is boring. I don't want to hear what one of them has to say.
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, they're not really perfect.
No.
They probably don't even feel like they're perfect. It's an unrealistic standard that we set for ourselves. So just looking at like, how am I being an imposter syndrome is so much about unrealistic things. As we just said, like, despite all the evidence, you think this other way. That's unrealistic. Setting unrealistic standards for ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I have a whole side of my closet that is an unrealistic standard side of a closet. Because I'm never going to be a size 4 again. It's just not going to happen. Like, it's unrealistic. But in my mind, that's what size, for me, I should be. An unrealistic standard that I'm holding myself to.
Free yourself. Free yourself. Yes, I think another tip that I heard that I'm loving is this phrase, that's a them problem, not a me problem. Because
Yep.
I do think sometimes we're put in situations where people will put things on you, right? So whether it's through social media, somebody saying something, you'll have lots of positive, let's say you put up something and then you get lots of positive feedback, you get one negative thing, right? Or you're at work and you get promoted and the people that maybe you've surpassed are older than you, more experienced, you're younger, and they'll say something like, why do you deserve to get this? You haven't been at this company long enough. And they're
Mm-hmm.
putting their imposter syndrome on you of like, why was
Yep.
it where they
Yep.
skipped over? And I think that's really powerful to be able to say in your mind, that's a them problem, not a me problem.
Yep.
I have
Yep.
a family member who every time I talk to her about anything, thank God I don't talk to her that much, but talk to her about something positive going on in my life or with our company or with my career. She's always like, how are you able to do this kind of stuff? Like, how are you, not certified, but like, what gives you the right to,
Yeah. How are you
how are you
qualified to do that?
qualified, and it just drives me crazy. And when I think about that phrase of that's a them problem, not a me problem, I think about her because that is in my most kind of when I'm not, defensive about it. Like that's her own feelings of
Yeah.
insecurity going,
Yeah.
oh, I could never do that. Putting that on to me, I don't have to take that. I can just see, oh, that's her and have a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of like, grace with her about that she's struggling with that perhaps. But
Yeah.
definitely I can't take that on because that'll stop me in my tracks. That
Right.
phrase will come up, what makes you qualified to do this? So I think that's a them problem, not a me problem is a good one. Any other
I do like
tips
that.
for folks?
I think also, celebrate what you're doing well. Because when you have those moments of, I feel crappy, I don't deserve this. And as I said, you have the very big wins, when people like putting the big wins as their milestones of being competent or being good, particularly when it comes to work or, parenting or any of those things, let's be clear, they're few and far between. Few and far between, right? Especially if you're a parent, getting the, oh my God, I love you, you're the best mom in the world, comes way less than you're getting on my nerves. Oh my God, I can't believe you're talking to me this way. Why am I even listening? Like, there are big gaps. And the same thing with work. The big promotions, the big raises, the you did amazing comes fewer and it's farther between than the little things of good job on that. Nice chat, those things are happening, but they're happening more frequently than the big things. Yeah. So you got to lean into the small successes, lean into those small ones because those are happening every day. You just have to seek them out, acknowledge them, and put them up there, right alongside of my promotion.
Yeah, I love that. I love, love, love that thought. It's so true. And there's so much, guys, here on this topic. This will not be the only time we explore this because it comes up all the time in our work and in leadership. And so I just want to thank you, Blonka, for joining us today. You're such a help for me personally in overcoming my imposter syndrome when it creeps up. And I appreciate you.
Likewise.
Thank you. And I appreciate you giving some advice to our listeners out there. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you again next week. If you want to hear more from Blonka, you can look at our previous episodes. And we're coming up, Blonka, can you believe it, on our 100th episode pretty soon.
That's crazy.
So thanks to everybody who's out there supporting us. We really appreciate it. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.